What's up, everybody? This is Chris Nichols, and you're listening to an episode of the Nichols&Dimez Show featuring Thomas Harrison. Enjoy. Thomas, man, what's going on?
Nichols, what is up, dude? It's good to see you. Man,
it's so good to be back in New York City, dude. I appreciate you having me out here.
Yeah, man, it's fun. I'm glad we're doing this. I can't believe it's happening.
Yeah.
It's exciting, dude.
Oh, man, yeah. Well, this is one I've been excited about for a while because you have such a cool journey with the stuff that you've built and that you're currently building. And I'm going to give everybody a quick intro so they know what that context is, and then we'll get into your story. And I'm just excited, man. You've been a longtime friend of mine from college, so this is really cool.
Awesome, man. I'm excited as well. Thank you for having me.
Oh, man, absolutely. All right, guys. Well, I'm here with Thomas Harrison today, who is founder and CEO of Rocko, which is a platform that helps crypto owners borrow cash using their crypto assets as collateral. He previously founded Blockrize, which was acquired by major crypto exchange Gemini in 2020. Founded and led by Tyler and Cameron Winklevoss, otherwise known as the twins who sued Mark Zuckerberg for stealing their idea to found Facebook. At Gemini, he built and launched the Gemini Credit Card, which offers up to 3% back in crypto on every purchase. He is originally from Jackson Hole, Wyoming, attended Santa Clara University, and is currently based in New York City. So, I love this story, man, and it's been fascinating to follow it along the way ever since we were classmates in college. And of course, also I spent some time living in Jackson Hole, so we have that in common too. Yeah. But dude, I think maybe a good place to start would be, what was your life like growing up in Jackson Hole? And the purpose of this question is just to give people an understanding of where you come from and what made you so entrepreneurial, what made you gain this mindset that you have to go against the grain and work for yourself.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, growing up in Jackson was awesome. It's such a just incredible place.
Yeah.
Just so much outdoors, so much to do there in terms of, in the winter it was skiing, it was skating, it was sledding, we had cross country skiing, it was kind of all those and things. And then in the summer, it was hiking, camping, playing in the lakes, playing in the river.
Yeah.
Just such a beautiful place to grow up and so much to do. I absolutely loved it. It was also a really small town though, right?
Yeah.
So it's like 10,000 people. So growing up there, it's all you're used to, but it's like this, really small town feel where, you run into people everywhere you go. Whether it's the grocery store, the town barber, the restaurant I worked at, like people would come in all the time that I would know, and then so I'd serve them. And it was just kind of this funny environment, but really a cool community. I loved it. There was one local high school that pretty much, that I went to, and a couple of really small private schools, but they were so small that they were even part of our sports team. So it's just,
oh wow,
yeah, it was cool. We had, for instance, growing up in Wyoming, one of the funny aspects about it was when we wanted to play like another high school in soccer or tennis or something, we had to drive at least 3 hours because that's where the closest town was to play.
Wow.
So then like the state tournament, you're driving 8 hours across the state, and you're missing like 3 days of school to for it because it's such a far journey. But
gosh, you're bringing back all these memories for me because I lived there for a year, and what an experience though. But
yeah, right. Yeah. I mean, you kind of it's a cool community with everything you can do, and just it's really built around the outdoors. Like the people who live there, people who spend time there, just they love doing all these active things and taking advantage of the incredible wildlife.
Yeah. Definitely, man. Yeah. So, like, what was how would you describe the influence your family or your community had on you to make you so driven, and and how did that get you eventually to Santa Clara University?
Yeah, I mean, I would say that. My parents were awesome. Very supportive. I think they really knew that I was a ambitious, driven person
from a young age.
Yeah, I liked doing well in things.
Yeah.
And so I was very, I wanted to make sure I was, whether it was grades in school or whether it was, sports, I put in a lot of effort because I wanted to exceed. I wanted to win. I didn't always win, but I wanted to. So I think they saw that, and they're very supportive of me. They always encouraged me. They always pushed me. They always, helped me with whatever, with what it took to do that. So yeah, it was, they were great. They're great parents.
That's cool. So like, what brought you to Santa Clara? Because going like, from Jackson Hole, Wyoming to this smaller private school in California that we went to. How'd you end up there?
Yeah, so I applied. It's funny. I only applied to schools really on the East Coast. I was kind of like dead set that I was going to end up on the East Coast for college, and was just yeah, a bunch of schools. And then there was a girl in my class in high school who had gone to Santa Clara. Oh, I think. Wait, Ellie Rice? Did you ever?
Yeah, I think
Brooke,
so.
Right? Or you had met Brooke maybe at some point? But
yeah,
she went and played soccer there.
Of course. Brooke, Brooke and Ellie. Yeah.
Yeah, so they both went and played soccer there. And I was friends with Ellie, so I knew about it from her, and I was just like, and she encouraged me to apply, and I did, and I ended up getting in, and I was just like, you know what, I'm gonna go check out the school, see what it's like, and
that's cool.
And you went to Santa Clara, so you know exactly kind of this feeling, but you show up and you get on campus, and you're just like, this is
fall in love with it.
Yeah, it's like this is a resort. It's like these like beautiful grass lawns, it's these beautiful buildings, the palm trees, the outdoor pool, and I'm just like, having had spent the last 18 years pretty much of my life in Wyoming, where it's winter 8 months of the year, and it's freezing cold and snow, and I'm just like, and this was March, mind you, when I was visiting, so I'm just like, it was 70 degrees and sunny. I'm like, this is winter. Like, this sounds pretty nice. Yeah.
Well, I think we have a lot in common with the idea that you came from a small town in Wyoming. I came from Hawaii, where I grew up, right? And then we ended up in the Silicon Valley, where so many people from all over the world basically come and gather to try to do something big.
Yep.
Right? It's the center of innovation in the world, right? With all the tech and everything.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that was a big motivating factor too. I mean, when I was checking out school, I remember I was able to do this like class, essentially like a mock class, and they brought in they had a real university professor who taught business management. I ended up taking him later when I actually went to school there, but he did that he essentially, for some of us prospective students, did like a kind of a mock class and did a full lesson, and it was just like there's probably 15 of us in there, and it was just like this great conversation, and these he was bringing up these really cool thoughts, and just I just it was awesome, super stimulative, and I just was thinking. And the best part about it was like it was really emblematic of like what the classes were actually like, right? It was small class sizes, it was professors who were passionate and who kind of engaged in conversation. So I was just like that was my high school, right? Coming from a small town, that kind of small community feel. I felt that Santa Clara, or at least from my day there at Santa Clara, like I felt like they kind of have it here as well, even though it's obviously in a much, much bigger area and region and city. That
makes sense. Yeah, so Santa Clara definitely had a big impact on really making that entrepreneurial bone in your body come alive.
Yeah, I think definitely part of it's being in the Silicon Valley area, right? Where you kind of have these apps and these ideas that are popping out, and they hit that area first. I remember like Snapchat, first hearing about Snapchat, and hearing it was some Stanford kid who was dropping out, and he was not too far from our age. I'm just like, wow, like that would be sick if that was me, right? Yeah. It's like, why isn't it? And then Uber, I think I remember I think it was Justin, our buddy Justin, who was going around when Uber first came out and like getting people to sign up, and he would get $20 credit.
Oh my god!
I was like, right, this is like, we're just like, what is this? He's like, oh, you can take it back from the bars. We're just like, what?
That is funny.
And so it's like you're surrounded by these these new ideas and these new companies, and I think it's just like it's such a cool place to be because of that, and it just rubs off on you. It's hard not to be thinking of ideas or kind of envisioning business plans in your head when like that's everything you're interacting with in your daily life there.
Absolutely, man. Yeah, so I mean, I can totally relate to that mindset. I mean, we are doing our things, right? And we have this strong community from Santa Clara, I think largely because of that environment that we were in and the community that just we had built there. So that's cool, man. All right, so after college, you were in the business school, of course, right? Yep. We studied the same thing. How did you approach the corporate world or your career after college? Did you know when you were graduating Santa Clara, hey, I want to do something on my own eventually? Was that in your plan, or did you just think, hey, let me just get a cool job in the tech industry or whatever, and then maybe do that later?
I knew I wanted to go into the startup scene. My junior year, I did a internship at a larger tech company, and there were corporate finance and accounting division. And so it was a fine internship, but I just quickly realized I was like, I don't want to do this once I graduate. And so
why?
I mean, I think it's also because, like, you know, the fact that I was an intern doing like intern work, but like, you know, there's a lot of times where I'm literally just like plugging numbers into an Excel or like, you know, moving files to a new location and just, you know, I got paid and I liked the people I worked with, but like, it just wasn't very stimulating work and it wasn't really fulfilling either.
I see. Mm-hmm.
Right? It's kind of where you're most excited to finish work at the end of the day and go home and hang out with your buddies because you're living, you know, in a house at college, right? So that's, and yeah, it's just like, so when you kind of think of like something where, you know, when I was getting closer to graduating, I was spending more time thinking of ideas, right? Spending more times of like how we could build an app or how we could build a business. And actually a lot of, you know, Chris Strickland, right? So we would spend a lot of time together, like talking about different ideas and kind of, you know, coming up with ways to build a new app, a social app, or kind of a, I remember one business idea he had, which was just like essentially becoming like a warehouse for like protein, like whey protein, essentially starting an online business. And so it's like, that stuff is really fun to think about, right? It's kind of, it's stimulating. It's the type of stuff where you're like, you know, you get excited and, you know, you don't think about how much time you're spending on it because it's enjoyable. And so, I knew I wanted to do something in that area of kind of, you know, entrepreneurship or startups, but I just didn't know what. And when I did graduate, I traveled for a couple months, you know, did the cliche kind of, you know, Southeast Asia trip after you graduate college, which was a blast, mind you. It was a very cool trip. But came back, and I think within a day or two of being back, I got a call from a buddy of mine. And he's like, hey, there's a guy I know just dropped out of Stanford, just started a company. They just raised a seed round. You should go talk to him. I think he might be a good fit for their team. Yeah. So I show up, and, you know, it's a couple, kind of the cliche Stanford dropouts. And they built this, like, consumer mobile app that's growing across campuses. And they literally have this, you know, startup house that they're all living in and they're working in. And they were like telling me a bit about it, and I was just like, you know what, this sounds cool. Like, I'm in.
That's awesome. You were just ready to dive in and kind of take a risk with the start. You were really drawn to the startup idea.
Yeah, I mean, I thought it was just like, it was a really cool, I thought a great opportunity because it was like, this is what I want to do. I get to learn more about it. I get to work with like smart people. And one of the things that really draws me to it, I think, is the idea that it's like, it's unsolved, right? They had this idea, they had this app that was growing, but like in general, it was not a finished product, right? There was no revenue model. There was no, there was issues, still acquisition issues, retention issues. Like there's a lot of good stuff there, but it was still early stage, and so much still needed to be fleshed out and solved for it to be a successful company. That's what I kind of like, that idea of the, they don't necessarily have all the answers, nor do I, but like, we can hopefully arrive at them and build something from it. So yeah, it was a cool experience. And
so you were there for how long? A couple years or so?
Yeah, I was there for a couple years. I lived in the startup house for a year.
Wow. So you're actually with your colleagues.
Yeah, I would.
What was that like?
I mean, it was fun. The guys I worked with were great guys. I'm still friends with them. Really smart guys. But I don't think I would ever live in a startup house again.
Yeah, it can be a lot, dude. Well, I mean, you're first of all, working at a startup and living by yourself is overwhelming enough. Yeah. Because you're kind of expected to work around the clock, right? Like, you're all in it together. And then you're living together. Yes. You're literally working around the clock.
I mean, there's no mental break, right? And there's no physical break.
Yeah, and you're living with your bosses.
Yes, so it's like you really like, yes, they're very like cool people, but there's also like you always kind of have that that guard up, or you don't want to. Right, yeah, because it is work at the end of the day. And yeah, I remember there'd be times I'd be going to bed, and it'd be like a Wednesday, it'd be like 10:30, I'd be like in bed, I'd knock at the door like, hey Thomas, do you mind helping me with something?
Oh
like,
my gosh.
I was just like, oh god.
Jeez, dude, that's an experience.
Yeah. But no, it was I'm glad I did it. It was a great experience. Like, I worked with some really smart, great guys I'd still keep in touch with regularly. And it was just, it was I learned a ton. So absolutely worth it.
Man, that's crazy. So, okay. So that was your experience. And I definitely want to spend a lot of this podcast talking about the Blockrize story, right? Because that's such a huge accomplishment that you have. And then what you're working on now, Rocko, we'll get to that later because that's much newer, right? But I want to understand the story of how you transitioned from working at this company, living in the startup house, to then starting your own business in the crypto industry, which at that point was still like largely unknown, right? You were early, frankly, right? So maybe I just want to understand, like, when did you start thinking while you were working at that company, okay, I'm going to do something on my own? Or was it an idea that came to you first, and then you said, okay, how can I make this something of my own? Could you just walk us through that journey and how you started Blockrize?
Yeah, so after about 2 years at this early stage startup, we ended up shutting down, and just weren't able to kind of get to that next phase.
Got it.
And at the time, I was kind of, okay, I wanted to try something new, and it was I wanted to build something of my own, right?
Yeah.
Essentially, start my own company. And
did you feel, sorry to interrupt, but did you feel like you had enough experience at that time in the startup world that, like, hey, I know how this goes now, I believe I can do this?
Well, I thought I had enough experience, yes. Whether I actually did, I think, is much more up for debate.
Okay, well, that confidence goes a long way.
Well, one of the things that when you're like, I bring up the Snapchat and Evan Spiegel, right? This idea of, like, Evan Spiegel, obviously really successful person, very smart, but he was just a student our age at Stanford who then created a multi-billion-dollar business.
Right.
And so you kind of get this sense of, well, why couldn't I do something similar, right? Why couldn't I also be successful in starting something or building something? And that, when you ask that question, it's just kind of, you start getting this idea of, like, well, like, maybe the answer is, like, I can. Maybe I can be successful. Maybe I should give it a shot. Maybe, like, the difference, for many people is that they're, it's kind of a, whether you actually take that chance, whether you actually, persevere.
Right.
And so I kind of was starting to look for different ideas and things to focus on, and thought, I was exploring a bunch of things in fintech. Like, I wanted to do something with, like, a rent event initially. And then during this time, I was getting pretty excited about Bitcoin, because I read a book, Digital Gold by Nathaniel Hopper. And it just kind of talked about, like, where the origin story from it, kind of who were the early characters, what kind of the technology did, and what the ideals of it, right? This idea that you could build a decentralized, global financial system, where anyone could participate, and no one entity could essentially control it or dictate it. I thought it was just really kind of interesting idea, and it's kind of it's this interesting idea in the sense that it's an experiment, right? And so as I was getting more kind of into it and excited about it, I was talking to people, and I found that others were excited about it or interested in it, but they wanted to even buy it and own some, but they were just kind of too scared, right? Because it was complex, it's risky,
right?
You have Warren Buffett calling it rat poison squared, right? So it's like, I get it, I totally get it,
right.
And so I kind of started thinking, well, is there a way to to tackle those barriers and to help solve this, and to bring more people to kind of get them exposure if that's what they want? And after kind of ideating and having a lot of conversations, really arrived at this idea of, well, what if you could just earn Bitcoin as a reward on your credit card purchases? Right. You take a product that American consumers are intimately familiar with. They use on an everyday basis. And there's a precedence of them shopping for new credit cards that give them the types of rewards that resonate with the things that they like, right? Where it's like, you'll search for a new credit card because you want Delta Sky miles, or because you want, Hilton points, right? And so I started getting some, kind of early validation from talking to people and seeing, was this something that they would be interested in, kind of their concerns, just trying to get a temperature. And I thought there was enough there that after I did some really, kind of exploration, was just like, I'm going to start trying to build this.
Wow.
And so I did. I was trying to, mind you, at the time I had zero knowledge of credit cards. The credit card industry.
Right. But you thought you had a pretty solid knowledge of crypto in general, and Bitcoin.
Less even that. I just thought it was more of. I mean, I more saw it as, there is a playbook of how to launch a credit card and how to manage a credit card business. Just because I didn't know it didn't mean that I couldn't learn it, or that I couldn't, recruit the people that could.
Sure.
And in terms of kind of adding the crypto element, it was kind of similar. It's this idea of, like, yes, I'm not necessarily like the domain expert on everything Bitcoin, but I like building products. I like building things that people enjoy and people use, and so like that, I thought that was kind of my skill set. And so envisioning this product, I was like, yeah, why not try to build it?
Right.
And see where it takes me. And so, yeah, I started essentially working on it. Started, reading, learning everything I could about the credit card industry. Whether it was going to conferences, calling people, reading things online.
Yeah.
I've read numerous textbooks. Like, I kid you not, I still have them, like, just textbooks on, like, credit risk underwriting or, managing a consumer lending business.
Yeah,
like,
so you really just self-taught. You self-taught all this stuff.
Well, it was more just like, I just, wanting to understand, like, all the different aspects involved. And,
of course, yeah.
And, through that, through that journey, just continued to meet really smart people and better understand, like, what were the pieces that were going to be needed to build something like this. Mm-hmm. And one of the first things we did was essentially launch a wait list. And the idea there was I have this idea. I need to get validation beyond just, like, my friends saying they would be interested, right? Because that doesn't take you far. But that was kind of a very popular thing for fintech companies, or even more startups to do, is just the idea of validate by launching a wait list, capture emails of interested users, get feedback, generate momentum. And so I did. I launched a wait list, and I essentially, kind of built the value prop, and looked at a lot of different kind of similar launches of fintech products, and it was cool. We kind of we had this blow up where we got 5,000 signups within, like, the first few days, and we got an article in Market Watch and a couple others. And it was just,
wow.
Yeah, which made no sense because it was just me, right? Yeah. It was like, I say we, but it was really just like me and a buddy of mine who was acting as a kind of as a technical advisor to help with some of the web work.
But I feel like that shows how important timing is, right?
Yes.
I mean, okay, go ahead.
Well, I was gonna say, like, that was the peak, and then it was the next year and a half, and just when you build something, like, it's peaks and valleys, right?
Yeah.
And so we had that great peak, but then after that, it's still just not nearly enough, right? 5,000 signups is nothing at the end of the day for kind of building a credit card business. And how many of them are actually going to sign up, right? And how many of them are actually going to be qualified enough to get the card? And so and and how do you scale past 5,000? So that's kind of what the next year and a half was spent on, of, like, trying to build this value proposition, trying to find believers, both in terms of, people to recruit to the team, investors, bank partners, trying to bring all the different pieces together to launch something like this. So at that point, it was, okay, what is it, continuing to build that, like, what does it take to launch this card? So it was, talking to people in the space, trying to recruit a team, ended up bringing on a co-founder, technical co-founder, really, talented engineer. We recruited a couple other guys who had experience in launching in credit card programs, and we were able to build some early tech. But this is over the course of a year and a half, right? So it was just, for every kind of step forward, there's 5 steps back in a way. And so, or maybe a better expression is, like, for every big win you get, you have 5 losses, or for every yes you get, you have 50 no's. And so,
for sure,
it was very much this just persistence game of trying to get believers in the product and the team, for such a long time. Yeah.
So I mean, I do like how you're simplifying the answer to my question by talking about the trials and tribulations of starting a business in general, and then learning about how starting a credit card works.
Yeah.
But you picked a specific type of credit card that is pretty complex, with using crypto, using Bitcoin as rewards. And there are so many questions that can come from that. But I just want to ask, I guess, more generally, because we could talk for hours about the legal implications, because obviously still today, from a regulatory perspective, a lot of these crypto businesses and these exchanges still don't know what the hell the rules are, right? And I mean, this is a massive thing going on with the government. This was like 6 years ago when you were working on this, right? And we're in late 2023 right now. So it was even way more so, what are the rules around this thing, and how do you get past it, especially in the financial industry, which is highly regulated? How did you approach that as far as learning what the rules are, or assessing the risk by doing something that really no one is really doing?
Yeah, so one of the things actually about the credit card was, most of it, there was a playbook. There was kind of a set regulatory landscape. and written rules of how to operate.
Yep.
The crypto component definitely added a twist to it. And definitely made it more complex. But to be honest, the credit card piece itself was actually the bigger challenge.
Interesting.
Because, I mean, if you think about what it takes, think about what it takes to launch a credit card, you're essentially giving someone an unsecured line of credit where they can, they can essentially carry that balance month to month. And so in order to get there, you have to think about all the different pieces that are involved. The first is you have to build an application, right? You need to be able to take someone's personal information. You need to be able to check they are who they say they are. You need to be able to then store that information in an encrypted database, right? You need to be able to then pull their credit report. You need to be able to then build an underwriting framework that evaluates based on like all these different attributes whether or not they qualify for your card. Whether or not they qualify, let's say they qualify for your card, then you have to figure out how you're actually going to then print them this card. How are you going to essentially encode it with the necessary information for it to work on these wherever they swipe it.
The physical aspect of it, yeah.
How is it going to be shipped out to them? Once they get it, how do you have who's the bank that's issuing the card? Who's the network that it's going to run on so they can use it everywhere?
Yeah.
How are you going to deal with all the servicing? Whether it's because there's such complex regulation around credit cards. So things like, we would send out all these different statements and all these different, communications based on when they've made payments, when they've had the late fees, when they've their balance, is they haven't paid their full balance. And there are all these mandated communications, but then we also have to be able to send them in paper, right? So then you have to find out a way how can you actually print and send to all these different people in paper if they opt out of email communications.
That's so great.
And then you have to set up call centers to have people answer the phones. You have to set up internal service support teams to answer email communications.
Yeah.
You have to if they don't pay, you have to set up collections agencies to be able to call them. So you have all these different people, and not to mention, you also, if you think about it, when someone's using a credit card, you're extending them credit.
Yeah.
Let's say you have $10 million that's being borrowed, right, from all these customers.
Yeah.
You have to find $10 million of cash to lend them, right?
Yeah.
So if you think about this, like in order to build a credit card, like you have all these different components, all these different functions that need to come together, and you have to do so in a way that it ensures that you're in compliance with all these different regulations,
right?
Because it's such a heavily regulated product in the industry.
Yeah.
And then two, you have to do so in a way that mitigates risk, right? Because you have people who are essentially going to default on their payments and not pay you back unintentionally, or good actors who can't pay for whatever reason. But then you also have fraudsters. You have people who are trying to take advantage of your this credit and essentially steal your money. And so you have to manage all of that while also ensuring that you're providing a value proposition and a card experience that's better than any other credit card out there, especially when you have Chase and Amex offering $200, $300 bonuses. Right.
Yeah, you're operating as a bank, and there's basically
so that's
a big deal.
Yeah, so like when you frame it like that, and I almost wish that it's almost good that I didn't have that framing when I first started out.
Yeah.
Because I probably wouldn't have tried to actually do it, because I would have thought there's no chance I'm going to be able to pull this off.
That's so interesting. So you just kind of going for it without understanding fully what was in store in front of you was the reason why you went ahead with it.
Yeah, that.
That's huge.
What's the word for it? Like the naivete.
Yeah.
However you say it. That.
Yeah.
Like it's a blessing and a curse, right? It's a curse in the sense of, you're kind of signing up for something that you don't know what the full scope of what you're signing up for,
right?
And what means that it can be so much more challenging than you thought. But it's also a blessing because it's like you probably wouldn't have started down that path, and you wouldn't have gone through that journey if you had known that in the first place.
Yeah, well, just like Peter Thiel said, right? The move fast and break things. I think that was him, right?
Maybe it was the Facebook mantra, right?
Was it? Maybe I'm getting mixed up with somebody, but yeah, I mean, just that startup, or what is the other one where you're falling down and the plane is falling out of the sky and you're building the plane along the way.
Yeah,
it's the same idea of the startup thing where you're just going in, because so many people get so hesitant and scared of the risk or of what's ahead, and they never start something, right? And so that's one of the biggest pieces of advice that I've come across in talking to so many entrepreneurs is just got to go. You just got to start.
Yeah, I mean, my favorite quote is, "If you look before you leap, you'll never leap."
Yeah,
and I think it's just it's so true. Like if you know what it's going to take.
That's that's a good one. That's a good one.
It's almost good to sign up for things without with kind of a blind idea of what's going to happen.
Yeah. Wow. Okay, so I just want to circle back to the crypto aspect.
Yeah.
So how did you actually deliver crypto rewards for your customers?
Yeah, so what we did is, well, maybe if you don't, so I'll kind of talk about so we joined Gemini, right? So
so did that started after you joined Gemini?
Yes.
Okay, so I guess, all right, so then let's talk about the acquisition first, and then let's get to that, because I wasn't sure if you had that already operating.
No, so essentially at this time, this was in 2020, we were talking to just kind of a number of large crypto companies in the space. And one of them, Gemini, we had a conversation with them, and essentially we're kind of pitching them on this idea of us building a credit card for them, right? So we hadn't built a credit card at this point. Kind of from the process, realized it would be very difficult to try to build this card under our own brand and have success. So we somewhat pivoted to this idea of a B2B2C, where it's, if we can sell it to a big, well-known exchange like Gemini, and they essentially have it under their brand, and they issue it to their customers, and we essentially are the platform powering it, it would kind of solve the customer acquisition issue.
I see.
And give us a lot of kind of, it would, so a different model, but hopefully it would de-risk kind of the business we were trying to build. And so we originally spoke to them about that, and then we just continued to have conversations with the Gemini team and kind of talking about what the benefits of the card could be and how we would build it, and it was just it was just great conversations. Like we thought there was it was very collaborative, and we just kind of kept getting more and more into it, and just kind of found more and more synergies. And then that just kind of naturally evolved to this idea of, well, what if we were a team of 4 at the time, like what if your team joined our organization, and essentially took this idea and grew it and
developed it,
exactly, made it even bigger into the Gemini credit card, and something that they would launch to all of their customers in the credit card business that they would own. And so we were excited. Like we had after meeting with the team and the executive team, and just the greater number of people across the Gemini org, we're like, this is a team of really smart people, really motivated people, and we just thought this was an awesome opportunity. So we were officially acquired in July 2020.
Wow. Okay. So just to go back to the start of those conversations for a potential acquisition, you guys, you had validation that you had a cool idea, right? And it had some spark, right?
Yeah.
But you realize, hey, we can't do this ourselves. This is a huge
undertaking.
Huge undertaking. Yeah. And with this very hard type of industry to develop a product in and make a credit card, all that stuff. So you realize, hey, we need to team up. We want to get picked up. So did you start reaching out to big organizations in crypto that were established?
It was kind of, we did. It was kind of a mix. We started reaching out to a lot of companies.
Or did people recognize you guys?
Well, we weren't trying to get acquired originally. We were reaching out to big companies to kind of sell them on the idea of, hey, what if we launch a credit card for you? Yeah. And essentially, it would be their name on the card, but powered by us.
Got it.
And then that conversation it kind of naturally evolved into this idea of, what if you all just came aboard, and Gemini and became part of our organization and launched it. Yeah. And we just thought it made all the sense in the world. Given our early stage, and
their establishment.
Exactly. And at that time, I mean, Gemini, was a international organization, large company, and so they're already operational in all 50 U.S. states. Yeah. They had a crypto exchange, and so they essentially would be able to put the resources and investment into building the credit card program. They also had the crypto component and the custody of that crypto component already built in as well.
Yeah, I mean, Gemini is obviously an amazing suitor to buy the company, but I'm more interested in how did that bidding process look? Did you have interest, or I don't know what you're able to share about that?
Yeah,
share whatever you can, but you know what I mean? Like, what was the competition like from companies? Because Gemini picking you guys up, that's a huge acquisition.
Yeah, so I mean, we did have some other conversations with other companies in terms of potential acquisition. Mm-hmm. We really only, for most of them, we only had a conversation or two.
Yeah,
it was pretty clear to me early on that Gemini was the company that we wanted to end up at for just a number of reasons.
Yeah,
and one of the number of reasons, and so. During that process, pretty much, not that those other companies were, bad companies or wouldn't have great to have been at, but just I don't think any of them saw the vision or kind of would give us the kind of autonomy and the ability to build this card the way that we thought would make the most impact.
Right.
Like Gemini did. And so kind of working with, the executive team there and Marshall, their chief strategy officer, and Cameron and Tyler, we were, we're just like, these are the guys we want to work with.
For sure.
They've built the organization that we want to be a part of, and so we kind of focused all of our efforts on that.
Mm-hmm. What was your experience with Tyler and Cameron Winklevoss, who are obviously very well known in the world, being kind of the enemies of Mark Zuckerberg and the founding of Facebook, and being the two rowers in the Social Network movie? I mean, that's pretty cool that you worked side by side with these guys and they bought your company.
Yeah, I mean, they're awesome. I mean, they're great guys. I mean, it's kind of funny because they very much are visionaries. They just have these really big ideas, these huge ideas, and just are always talking about kind of these just the concepts they'll bring up and things they'll discuss. It's just it's very high level thing. It's very kind of big thinking, but at the same time, they're just very down to earth people.
Yeah.
They're nice, they're polite, and so I mean, I think they built an incredible organization.
Uh-huh.
So that's kind of that's I think was a big reason too for kind of why we wanted to go there. Just our interactions with them and the other executive members. Just we felt that it was a driven, motivated, good group of people.
Yeah.
That we would enjoy working with, and that was exactly the experience I had for my time there.
Yeah, that's so cool. So let's just talk a little bit about that time there. So when you developed it into the Gemini Credit Card, which I have one, thanks to you for helping me get one. So I understand how it works, and just for the audience, basically, you have this credit card, just like a cashback reward on any credit card or points or whatever you might be earning. You get the crypto of your choice that Gemini has listed, right? And it's up to a 3%.
Yep.
Right. And I think there's some promotion sometimes if you buy gas or whatever, groceries. Yep. So, I was doing that for sure. I was using it, and it's cool. It just shows up in your account.
Yeah. So, I mean, what we did with that, again, this idea, kind of the core concept was, we said, how can we take a product that is familiar, ensure that it stays familiar, mm-hmm. right? But then add this kind of crypto component that helps, bring people in without, and helps them acquire this asset without even having to think about it.
Yeah.
So most aspects of the card are what you would, find with other cards in terms of you have to apply, we pull your credit,
right?
You receive a physical card, it works wherever, MasterCard, stuff like that. But then what we did with kind of this crypto component, uh-huh. we thought was really interesting, where we built this system where you're able to receive a couple things that were kind of really unique. The first is instant rewards.
Okay.
And so
I remember that.
We were the first. Unless you can find someone else, but I don't think it's ever been done before. We were the first credit card to ever offer truly instant rewards, meaning that the moment you swipe, the rewards will land in your account. So if you swipe at a restaurant, the Bitcoin will land in your account right then and there.
Wow.
Apple, I think, is next in line for that. They're the daily cash, but so they have a 24-hour delay. But we did instant, and the reason that's important is because, one, people like instant gratification.
Yeah.
And then two, it's crypto's volatile, right?
Yeah.
So the thing is, if you own crypto and you are interested in owning more of it, you're probably bullish on it, right? It's a fair statement. which means it's in your benefit to have it sooner versus later.
Yeah.
And so that was kind of something that we wanted to do where people could receive it immediately.
Yeah.
And so they were bullish, and it can get that price appreciation over time. And then the other thing we did that I think is probably unique is we allow you to switch your rewards at any time. And so
yeah, that was cool. That's a cool feature.
Yeah, so you can essentially earn, the kind of the thing we'd say is like you can earn Bitcoin for breakfast, Sol for lunch, and Ether for dinner, right? In the sense that literally... That's
awesome. That's funny.
I mean, because the rewards are instant, though, like you swipe, they land in, and you can switch your reward type to another type of crypto right after, and then for your next swipe, it'll land in your account. So... yeah, it was cool. It was a really fun product to work on. I mean, I still use the card all the time.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely.
I love it. The customer base we had absolutely loved it. Or loves it, I should say. So, it's a really fun project to work on.
Man, that's cool. Well, you guys did I noticed how smoothly and beautifully the product worked. I noticed how it works because I have it. But man, I'm really impressed with what you guys did with that. So great job building that. It's working really well, and I can't wait to see.
I mean, it was a massive team effort. There was many smart people and talented people involved in launching that card program, and still there today managing it. Yeah,
well, I hope it continues to blow up. We just got to get the crypto industry to pop up again. Exactly, that's a whole nother conversation.
That is.
Yeah, but man, let's transition to how did you so. What was it that brought you to say, hey, my time at Gemini is done. It's time for me to do something else. Could you walk us through that transition?
Yeah. So, I'd been there for 2.5 years, and I'd probably been working on the credit card for another 2.5 before that. So maybe 5 years in total.
Yeah.
And at that point, we had launched the card. We had, I spent at least a year growing it, and I felt that it was in a good place. It was on a great trajectory.
Yep.
And for me, it was this idea of, okay, I kind of set out what I accomplished what I originally set out to do in building this card and launching it. And now that I have kind of the comfort that that it's in a good place and that there's a strong team managing it, it kind of gave me the flexibility to start thinking about what's next. And, I just, candidly got the itch of like, I want to find a new problem and I want to start a new company.
Yeah.
And so I left Gemini in February. Didn't know exactly what I was going to work on, but was kind of with the sole focus of, I'm going to find a new problem to start a new venture.
Sure.
And so that's what's brought me to today. Yeah.
So Rocko, this is pretty fresh.
Yes.
Right. So like, could you describe where you are in this journey? Because you haven't really shared much about it publicly.
Yeah. So we're pre-launch still, although we have a workable product today. We've just been using it internally. And so essentially what we're building is a platform that enables crypto owners to get liquidity from their assets without having to sell.
Right.
Right. So I think the easiest analogy to think of is, in traditional finance, if you have a stock portfolio, for instance, you can take out a margin loan against it. Right.
Right.
Say you own $1 million of Google stock, you can borrow $500K.
Sure.
And you see a lot of people, more affluent people, I guess, in that scenario, do that for things like real estate investments,
yep. Mm-hmm.
Or they want to buy a boat, or they want to buy a car,
sure.
or maybe they have some higher interest rate debt elsewhere that they want to pay down. So it just gives people liquidity of their assets without having to sell. And obviously the benefit of not selling is, one, you don't have to divest out of your investment. And then two, you don't have to realize any type of taxable gain.
Sure.
And so it's a huge industry for in kind of traditional finance. And there used to be a pretty large industry for it in crypto as well. But the issue is a lot of the centralized lenders that used to perform this essentially went bust. And there was a lot of risk on the institutional lending desks of these players, and their counterparties defaulted, which meant that many of these companies essentially couldn't cover the hole and had to go into bankruptcy.
Yeah.
So what we're doing, one of the things I think is really interesting is there's essentially these things called decentralized lending protocols. And if you think about Ethereum as a network where people can build on top of, you have what they call protocols, which is just essentially logic or these smart contracts that are just logic that allow people to interact with them and perform certain functions.
Right.
And so what you can do is essentially if you online, you can go to one of these contracts and you can deposit some of your assets, and in return you can borrow USDC, which is essentially a stable coin.
Right.
And so it performs the same function as a Fidelity taking your stock and giving you a margin loan.
Right.
But this is just some software code. It's permissionless, meaning that there's no one actually running it. It's just been written, and now it's immutable, so no one can change it.
Wow.
But the thing is, and one of the most incredible things is that the rates are like 2, 3, 4%.
Yeah.
Whereas in traditional financial markets today, if you want to borrow from Fidelity, it's probably 12, 13%.
Yeah, it's crazy.
And so the adoption is slim to none, at least among the kind of the general general consumers.
Yeah.
And the reason why, at least our thesis, is because it's incredibly complex.
Yeah.
To do this is it's difficult, it takes a lot of time and kind of know-how to actually be able to do it in a way where you feel comfortable. And that is essentially a barrier to adoption. So what we're trying to build is that kind of middle layer that makes it super simple for anyone, no matter their level of expertise or, kind of how they're able to just essentially take out a loan within minutes. Yeah. And since we're setting as that middle layer, we're not actually taking any of the credit risk ourselves.
There you go.
We're just more of kind of like operating, a marketplace of sorts, I guess.
That's interesting. So are you basically connecting consumers to banks who have that liquidity to provide that liquidity?
Yeah. I mean, that's probably a good analogy or a good way of thinking of it.
Yeah, that's cool, man. Wow. Okay. Well, we're excited to see what comes of that. When do you guys plan on launching? And what does your team look like right now?
Hopefully January.
Okay.
And it's
2024, that is.
Yeah. Yeah. And then it's hopefully right now I'm working with my former co-founder. Okay. And then another guy who was our third co-founder, who I worked with on the Gemini Credit Card. He was one of the tech leads. Okay. Really smart guy. So
you kept the same team.
Yeah. So it's the three of us currently.
That's awesome. Did they all come to Gemini with you?
My former co-founder did, but then the other guy, I met him at Gemini.
Got it. Very cool.
Yeah, and then worked with him at Gemini for a while. So yeah, I mean, they're really smart guys. Yeah, we're pretty excited about the project. Yeah. We just did like a kind of like a, what do you call it, like a founder fellowship type program over the summer, and just had a demo day. Yeah. Where we presented to a bunch of investors and kind of other builders and developers in the space, and it was cool to see the reaction. It's exciting.
That's cool, man. So that leads me to my next question, which is I want to understand from a more entrepreneurial perspective on a broader level, the challenges you've experienced. You can share a specific one that stands out or a more general one from your overall experience. But I also want to kind of focus this question to your first go at starting your own company versus the second go. I'm sure this second round is such a different experience because you've already done it, right? And you're much more comfortable with it. How would you describe your answer to that question as far as challenges, and answer it how you want? But I'm definitely interested in the comparison of the two ventures.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's just like, especially thinking of the first, even this time, to be honest, it's just it's really hard because you don't, you're essentially trying to figure out what to do and how to do it. But you don't know if it's right? There's no one telling you. Like I compare it to kind of, when I had that internship, right? Where essentially it was like, hey, this is your task. This is what you need to get done. Yeah. And it'd be like, okay. And it would be like, if I didn't know, I would go to my manager. I'd be like, how do I do this? Right. Right. And you kind of always get that instruction. You always get those explicit kind of directions. And it just makes things much simpler. But now when you think about it, like, okay, so your job is to, like, you're trying to solve this problem, and you know what the problem is. Yeah. Now you're trying to build a solution, but you have to, all these decisions around, like, how do you know if you're building the right solution? How do you know this is the right problem? Right. What should you be focusing on? All those kind of questions just make it kind of a really challenging thing where you have to, obviously you can kind of ask advice, and obviously you can try to look at what others done in the space. But the whole thing of, like, if you're actually doing something that's novel, means that, like, there is going to be no perfectly laid out, like, step-by-step plan of how to do it. Yeah. Otherwise, there wouldn't be the problem to be solved, right? Right. So I think that in itself kind of just can make it a really, challenging and kind of lonely journey, right? Yeah. Where I'm working on the credit card, the first few years was just, yes, we had some great wins, but just, again, as I kind of said it earlier, like, every win that we had was, only came after, 15, letdowns. right?
For
Whether
sure.
it's trying to convince investors to invest in you, whether it's trying to convince people to join your team, whether it's trying to convince, banks to partner with you, or whether it's even just like telling your friends or your friends' parents like what you're doing, and then being like, oh, you work in crypto, like, are you trying to like launder money? It's just like, right? There's just like these negative, like, so on top of all like the difficulties, you kind of just have these like negative connotations you have to work through, and so like that's tough, and like you know, and you just don't. And when it comes to like for the credit card, getting working, we kept working at it, but then you always have to keep asking yourself, like, when you kind of have these setbacks, when you like, the question is, you start asking yourself, like, should we pivot? Like, should we give up? Should I be doing something else? Like, and it's so hard to know the answer to that. Right. Yeah. Because
you can't really see ahead.
No. And it's like, there's reasons to pivot, because maybe it's like, hey, we pivot to something that, is an easier idea to execute on, or maybe, but then at the same time, it's like you hear about all these successful companies that like got told no a million times and didn't pivot, and then end up being multi-billion-dollar companies. So it's like, it's just tough.
That's so wild, man. Yeah, no, it's a great answer, and it because you really bring out the obvious of, starting a business, there's so much unknown. Any business, right? If you're going to sell waffles on the street, but you picked a business that was extremely complex, and the whole world just at this point, certainly when you got into it, it really didn't know much about. Yeah. And you're still, I mean, you've learned so much about it, and you're definitely an expert in the space at this point, but you're doing it again. So it's amazing, but that's a great answer to that. This question might almost be related in a way, but this is a question I ask everybody towards the end of the show, which is, what is an entrepreneurial life hack that goes against the mainstream belief based off your experience as an entrepreneur that you can share with the audience?
Good question. I don't know if there's like I don't know. I mean, I think the word like hack and entrepreneurship almost like doesn't kind of make sense, doesn't go together. Yeah. Because it's like this idea of like a hack is almost a shortcut to get there. Right. Where it's like when you go down, when you try to innovate, right? When you try to build something completely new, and that could be whatever it is. It could be tech, it could be a way of thinking, it could be writing a novel. Right. I think it's this idea of like it's going to be incredibly difficult, especially kind of the bigger the risk that you're taking. Right. And that it's really just like sheer persistence and sheer grit that I think really gets people to the other side. Absolutely. I think about this idea of how many times have you or people or myself or like said like, oh, I have an idea for an app. Yeah. Right. And then you start kind of thinking about it, and like the moment there's like one piece of difficulty, you give up on it. Yeah. I've done it a million times. Right? Like, and then like, but sometimes you give up because you don't think that's going to work out, or sometimes you give up because you're like, oh, I don't know how to code, or sometimes you give up because you're like, oh, someone's already done it. Right. And it kind of just like, I think when you see the really, really successful companies out there, the founders who have achieved that, like my belief is that they're the ones who've said like, who kind of had those, I don't know how to code, and they're like, okay, well, I'm gonna go find a co-founder who can. Yeah. Or someone else has already done this, and they say, well, I'm gonna figure out a way to do it better, right? And they kind of like, they take every single challenge, they take every single difficulty, and they essentially say this is a good thing, because one, it means it's going to decrease the number of people I'm competing with because they're going to give up, and two, it means that it's a bigger opportunity for me to solve something. Yeah. So that's awesome, man. Well, I love that answer. I did have a guest recently that reminds me of what the answer you just gave. He said, the hack is there is no hack. Really? Yeah. I mean, so that's cool, man. But no, thank you for sharing that, dude. Amazing story. Is there anything else you wanted to share about the journey that we didn't cover? I don't know. I think it's been such a fulfilling experience and one thing I will say is like so much of what like I was able to accomplish is because of the people and the support system. Yeah. Along the way, you think about I think this is kind of for most of us in our lives, but launching this credit card, being able to be a part of the Gemini organization, even finding the early believers and myself in that team, so fortunate for those people, whether they were, some of the investors who would write the first check, whether it was, just a friend who said, hey, I believe in you. Keep going no matter what, or kind of whether it was the Gemini organization saying, hey, we want you to be a part of this team, or even the amazing people there that I worked with to launch this card. Like, it really kind of puts it in perspective of, it's not one person who makes something like that happen. It's just like there's so many people who are absolutely critical to like that part of my journey, and so hopefully, hopefully I'm able to pass forward some of the incredible generosity and support people have gave me to others in the space.
Well, I'm really glad you said that, man. It's so true. The community that you surround yourself by. What do they say? The 5 people you surround yourself by are the people who. Well, what is it? How does it
become?
Go? Yeah, who you become. Yeah. This is just the same idea. Like, that support system is so important, and that's come up so many times in doing this podcast, talking to different entrepreneurs, where this journey can get very lonely.
Yeah.
Right. So I'm glad you said that. And kind of on that note, one other thing I like to ask is, who's somebody from your network?
You know who I'm going to say. Phil's Fire Foods.
Phil's Fire Foods.
Phil's Fire Foods.
I would love to have him on, man. That'd be great.
You got to have him on. I'll work on talking them into it.
Okay. Yeah, we gotta get Phil on the show, but that's Thomas's recommendation as a Nichols and Dimes show guest in the future. So, man, thank you so much, Thomas, for having me here in New York City and sharing your story. It's fascinating. It's so impressive. And I can't wait to continue to watch your journey and your success ahead, man. You got my full support no matter what.
Thank you, man. No, likewise. I think what you're doing with this podcast, the fact that you just said, hey, fuck it, I'm gonna start something I'm passionate about. I'm gonna learn how to do it. I'm gonna, do whatever it takes to grow it. Like, I think that's awesome. And that's, so thank you. And, I'm glad to, I'm grateful to have the chance to be on it. So thanks for coming to New York to chat.
Absolutely, man. Well, thank you. That means the world. All right. Well, I hope everyone enjoyed this, and we will chat soon. But thanks again, Thomas. Bye, everybody.
Thanks.
Thank you for joining our conversation today on the Nichols and Dimes Show. Please check out and follow my podcast Instagram at nicholsanddimezshow. I'd love to have you subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts or Spotify or YouTube. You can also find it on my website. I welcome and encourage any feedback you can share in the reviews so I can continue to improve and develop the show. Thanks again, and see you next time.